Well, perfect. Very nice to have you all here. Yeah, like Dan said last time I was speaking and turned into product, we were like in a small circle. But one thing that I think Dan did really well, and Jonathan, is the quality of the people stayed the same while they became bigger, which is really nice. I really enjoyed the discussions every time I was here. So I'm very much looking forward also to hearing from you afterwards, discussing with you. I also deliberately tried to make something slightly controversial so that we have maybe more things to talk about. So if you are pissed at something that I'm saying, just use that to discuss afterwards. Much looking forward to it. So just want to talk about basically 4 things. Like Dan said, mostly things that we did wrong, so things that we messed up in the past and that we maybe do slightly better now. Mostly around building something people need, not necessarily just want. Rejecting users, I hope that's the most controversial one, let's talk about that later. Talking to users in general, I think there's a lot of people who know a lot of stuff about talking to users, but yeah, I still want to share a little bit the things that we learned, the things that we did wrong in the beginning. Maybe that helps you get some ideas of what we can do differently. And the last one, going beyond talking to users, which is watching users, measuring users, KPIs, and all these things. But there will be no charts, don't worry. So the first one being building something that users need. So some of you maybe know Y Combinator. It's an accelerator program, investment fund. They have a mantra which is build something people want. And so first controversial thing, I slightly disagree with that. I think they know really what they're talking about. But I think in the past we built a lot of times things that people wanted, or at least said they wanted. And I think there's a huge trap to fall into. So when we talk to users in the very early days of building companies, we typically try to see, okay, what do they want? How do they envision the things that they want to use? What do they say they want to use? And we quickly learned that you can build something that users want, and users said, oh yeah, thanks, I wanted that, I like it, but that doesn't make it a great product. And there's a huge difference between wanting something and really needing something, really like harassing people to give you access to a product, really wanting to use that product all the time. And maybe one indicator could be that if you take it away from them, they're really upset. And that's not necessarily always the case for wanting. So something that we learned early on, we built a product that we thought all users wanted, which was, maybe you know from Gmail, the thing that auto-completes your emails. And we built exactly that for LinkedIn, because some people that we talked to said, oh, I really want that. I think that would be cool to have. And they still think it's cool to have, and they like to have it. But that product was a huge failure because everybody liked it. Everybody wanted it, but nobody really needed it. Nobody woke up at 2 a.m. and said, oh shit, I don't have that product. Oh, sorry for the cursing, I'm on camera. And so I think for us, that was the biggest lesson was there's a difference between wanting something, liking something, and not being able to live without something. Maybe you can think about the products that you use in your own daily life. Maybe there are things where if tomorrow they weren't there anymore, you would be really disappointed to not have them anymore. And I think that's the whole goal of building products. So that's, I guess, a bit what Superhuman, that's an email client, they always went for. We want to increase the number of users that are going to be really disappointed if we take the product away from them. And for example, going back to that LinkedIn product that we built, at some point we switched the product off and nobody complained. We had 30 users, they all said they liked the product, they all said, oh yeah, that's nice, but the moment that we switched it off for like a week to test if what users would say, nobody complained. Nobody sent an email, nobody noticed it, because it was just something they said they wanted at some point and not something they really needed. So I think that's, for us now, the biggest goal is to build something where users would be so disappointed if we take it away from them, and something where users go, I cannot continue working without Createx in this case. And that transitions a little bit over, like, how do you get into that direction? And so in the beginning, we had the big problem that we had maybe like 10 users in the beginning, and we talked to them like regularly, maybe once a week or something, and everybody said something different. Every single user had a different workflow. Every user had a different background, a different way of using our product, different intentions, different jobs to be done. And that's, I think, a huge problem for building at least early stage products. So when you are early stage, when you are a small team of 2 or 3 people, you have low resources and you need to really quickly take decisions, really quickly scale, really quickly make progress. And you can only do that if things are very clear in terms of how the product needs to progress. What are the next features you want to build? What are the problems that you're solving for your users? And in the beginning, we had 10 users, and like I said, all of them had different backgrounds, different use cases, different ideas. And so when we tried to build a roadmap, it was a nightmare. We had no idea how to build a roadmap for 10 people who all wanted something totally different. One would say, hey, I want it as a Chrome extension. The other said, oh no, please give me a web app. One said, hey, I wanted to do this and this. And the other one said, oh, please don't do that, right? So totally opposite feedback. And at some point, we decided to take a quite radical step, which was we actually stopped working with some of our users. So we had 10 users, and some of them were paying. And I think that's the part that is super painful as a founder. We actually stopped the contract with the people that already paid us for the product. We kind of, I guess, fired them or we rejected them. We told them we can no longer provide the product for you. And why are we doing that? Because the moment we started to kick out some of the users and just focus on less users but more homogeneous users, suddenly building a roadmap was super easy. Because suddenly all of the users were having the same workflow, having the same use case for our product, working with our product in the exact same way. And all of that made it that suddenly every single user interview was the exact same thing. Every user to every question would answer the exact same response, or more or less the same thing. And at some point, the user interviews got so repetitive that at some point I was like already in my head knowing roughly the response that they would give me to certain questions and just validating to make sure that they really think the same as all the other users. And for us, that was the biggest win that we had in the process of building our product, which was cutting down on users that do not fit our ICP, so our ideal customer profile, and instead just focusing on some of these like very few users, the ones that are the most active, the ones that are the closest to being disappointed by not having your product anymore at some point. And these users, we try to get more of these and just really focus down like the target group. And a lot of times when I talk to other startups, I feel like a lot of times you can cut down more and even more and even more the target group, even if you think it's already quite a close niche to build a product out. I think you can still try to think, is there a way that we can make it even smaller? Geography, way that they use it, jobs, titles, roles, environments, all kinds of different aspects. Maybe you can bring it down even more and even more, because I feel like the more you do, the easier it gets to understand, okay, how can we make these users really, really happy? And as soon as they become homogeneous, as soon as all of them answer the questions in the exact same way, suddenly building a product is just, you already know what you need to build. You know, okay, this is how they want to use it, this is how they think, this is their workflow, and suddenly building products becomes a lot easier. And for that, obviously, the biggest step is talking to users. So in the beginning, I think we didn't talk enough to users. Like probably everybody doesn't talk enough with their users, or most people. Maybe you sitting here, you talk enough with your users because you're interested in becoming better product people. But in the beginning, I think we talked to maybe 2 or 3 users like a month, which is definitely not enough. Then we scaled it to 1 to 2 users a week. And now we are like between 6 and 10 users a week. And I think that's super important because every single thing that you're building, you can very quickly iterate it with users, you can very quickly get their feedback, and you can shorten down the cycle time that you have. And for that, you need to be talking to your users all the time. But something that we did wrong in the beginning was talking to users in the wrong way. And I think there's a lot of things that you can do wrong when talking to users. And I'm not saying that we know how to do it right, but at least I can tell you all the things that we should have done earlier. The main one being something very silly and small, which is record your user interviews. So in the beginning, we always just talk to users, and then maybe sometimes I would talk to a user, and my co-founder Lucas would talk to another user, and then he would tell me, oh yeah, the person said this and that, and oh, this one said this and this. And there's I think, a lot of things that you just let fall through the cracks if you don't record your user interviews. So one being, you cannot capture all the information during the call. Like if you take notes, for example, while doing a user interview, there's no way that you can capture everything. Body language, hesitation, weird looks, and also especially, what did you say before? How did you word it? How did you word the question? That's something that I think a lot of people do wrong, and we did also wrong. Maybe we still do, I don't know, but I think we might do it slightly better now, which is asking loaded questions, asking questions in a way that slightly push the user into thinking a certain way and then answering a certain way. And all of it basically comes down to your user interviews being useless. Because if you ask questions in a way that the user basically already thinks about something that you want them to think about, they will answer in a way that you want them to answer, and obviously that will not help you understand their problems, their environment, the way they use things, and right now. And so I think that's, for us, one of the biggest lessons is record user interviews. At some point we started doing that, and now we still watch our user interviews from February all the time, from March, from April, from May, because at that point we asked questions for a certain feature, but they were talking about what they did before, how they used it, they talked about different things around it. And I think a few months later, you don't know what you might be looking for, but if you know you talk to a person in your ICP about a certain thing, you can rewatch the things that you talked to them about, and suddenly you discover, oh, they also talked about that. Oh, that's interesting, let me take a note. Or maybe you remember things in a wrong way, and you watch it, and you're like, okay, that's actually very different than I had in my mind. So these are things, I think, that you get from recording your user interviews. Who of you records user interviews while doing user interviews? A few. Really recommend it. I know something that we had as a problem was, we said, oh yeah, we should definitely record user interviews. And then it was like, oh, but it's awkward, you need to ask them, hey, can I record this? It's a lot more, it feels a lot more awkward than it actually is. All users that we talk to, they all say, oh, of course, yeah, you can record the user interview. Obviously, you need to ask them, they're important. And we only do it for internal purposes, and we also tell them, hey, this recording stays in the company, we don't put it on LinkedIn or something, because you obviously also want them to still feel comfortable and not be like, I don't know where this is going, right? But recording the user interviews has helped us. It also helps you watch yourself and say, oh wow, I really did not ask that question in a good way, right? So things that we discovered were, oh, we talked about topic A for 10 minutes, and then we asked them, hey, what do you think is your biggest problem? And then they say, topic A. Well, we talked about that for 10 minutes before asking that question, so obviously that is present in their mind, that is salient. They think about that topic, and then if you ask a question, they will think about what they most recently thought about. And by recording your meetings, your user interviews, you can catch your own mistakes a lot faster. You can iterate. You can ask somebody else, hey, maybe a product advisor, hey, can you maybe quickly watch this user interview and tell me what I can do better? And with that, you can suddenly go a lot deeper into understanding how to improve your questions, understanding things that they might misunderstand, things where they just rolled their eyes because they were confused, or things where they looked a bit hesitant, a lot of things that you can capture from there. Other very big mistakes that we did in terms of talking to users was, even though we tried not to ask loaded questions, so loaded question would be, I don't know, is this a good idea? Well, yeah, of course it's a good idea. Every user thinks everything is a good idea, right? But there's also more subtle ways of doing that, right? So you might talk to a user and you might ask a question just slightly wrong in a way that the user picks up on what you want him to answer. And users want to be nice, users want to help you. And a lot of users, without being mean, or without wanting to be mean, they just try to answer the question in the way that they think you want them to answer it. And that will destroy your product roadmap. And we learned that quite the hard way, because we built things that the users told us were a good idea because we asked it in a wrong way. And so there are, I think, a few ways that you can do that. like in a better way. One of them being ask questions in a way, so open-ended questions always helped us a lot. So how do you typically structure your day? What do you do after you do that, before you use our product, after you use our product? What do you think, what do you feel, what happens, right? So you just let them talk and just listen instead of leading with questions. Something we did wrong all the time, just asking, hey, is this better than this? You should do that. Just let them talk, listen to what they think and what they say and how their environment is. I think that's a very important part. And the other one that helped us a lot, and there were like a few product advisors that we worked this out with, is to do, for example, rankings. So instead of asking, hey, do you think this would be helpful for you or this would be a good solution for you, you can, for example, let them rank features. Like let's say, hey, we are currently thinking about what feature to build next. Here are 5 features. Can you rank them in how important they would be to you, for example? And ranking is something where user cannot lie to you or user cannot be nice to you because he has to make or she has to make a ranking, right? He has to choose what is first and what is last. And that definitely helps you understand, okay, what is it that we really need to do next and what is maybe a lot less priority. Similar thing is something that also a product advisor taught us, which is invest a dollar exercise. So basically what you do is you say, let's say you want to build different features or you want to improve certain feature sets, then you can ask a user, I give you $100 and here are 4 features that I will describe to you in detail. How would you spread these $100 across these 4 features? And that is something that has hugely driven our whole product design process, because a lot of times users tell us, oh, this thing is super important to us. For example, for us it was the design of the Chrome extension. A lot of users told us, oh, the design of a Chrome extension, that doesn't work with me, it's not very good, it's really something I don't like about GreyText. And I was like, oh wow, we really need to invest into redesigning the whole Chrome extension. And then we started asking users, okay, if you have $100 and you can invest into X, Y, Z, and improving the design of a Chrome extension, suddenly people were saying, oh, I would put $1 into improving the design and I would put $80 into this thing. And so suddenly by forcing the user to put numbers into things and to actually put a label on it, things become so much clearer. And that helped us a bunch, throwing out things that seem urgent and seem important versus actually important. And you can put it into a spreadsheet, you can make a graph out of it, you can tell your investors why you decided to do that instead of that, you can tell your boss why you did that instead of that. So a lot of very nice things come out of this. So invest $1 into these 5 features. Obviously, you need to describe the features in very detail. Very important that the features are well understood by the user, and also that the features are somehow comparable. It doesn't help if you say feature A is cure cancer and feature B is change the button color, then everybody will want to cure cancer. But if you have like everything a bit more like similar weight of the features and you're not sure how to prioritize, for us that was a game changer in terms of learning how the users actually think about things. There's a whole bunch more about talking to users. I'm not necessarily the biggest expert on talking to users, but these are just the learnings that we had. Asking open-ended questions, try not to load your questions, watch the recordings and see if you're loading your questions, and forcing the user to put numbers in any way, rankings, dollars, something that really you can use and where you can force the user to give you an actual answer. And again, the user is not mean, the user is, at least our users are not mean, our users are super nice and super cool, but they want to be nice, and so typically they try to answer in a way that they think you would like the answer to be, typically. And then there's a lot of things that actually something that we more recently looked into is talking to users is super helpful. You get feedback in terms of how they think, how they do things. But something that helped us a lot also was actually watching users and measuring users. Also again, a disclaimer, make sure your users are aware of what you're watching and what you're measuring. But for example, this can be as simple as shadowing them. You sit next to them while they use the product, or they screen share, and you ask them to do a task, and you watch them do it. And one of the few things, for example, that come along with that is suddenly you discover things in the product that you never thought somebody would do with the product. We had that a lot of times where suddenly users were doing things from like, wow, why I never thought somebody would click here and then do that, right? And so these are, I think, things that you cannot really find out in a user interview because a user will not talk about it. For example, when you talk about, hey, the onboarding process, what was confusing in the onboarding process? That's, I think, a very good case for where we didn't get a lot of information out of user interviews. We said, hey, what slowed you down in the in the onboarding process? You say, no, it was fine, it was good. But when you look at numbers and you look at maybe you replay sessions of them going through the onboarding, suddenly you see that on page 2 of the onboarding, they hover around a certain thing for a long time and they just kind of reread it and go back and read it again. They're confused. They don't understand what you said. So iterating, remeasuring, super helpful because these are things that you will not see from user interviews. Another example is measuring dead clicks. So I think you need at least engineering people close to you, but you can, in your product, install things that help you measure when people click on something that is not clickable. And that is super insightful because you might design a thing and it looks like a button to the user, but it doesn't look like a button to you, and the user will click on it, and that is just, once again, friction that you have in the product that is not necessary, confusion that you have in the product, and the easier you capture these things, so if I imagine some of you are product people, if you push your engineering people to install things that measure these dead clicks, super insightful, because suddenly you see, wow, 10% of all users click on this thing all the time because they think it does something, it doesn't do anything. You iterate it, less confusion, more clarity. Or an example, for example, recently we had a lot of cases where, so in CreateText you can upload people that you want to reach out to as a salesperson. So that's CreateText is basically an AI assistant for salespeople, and you can go on a LinkedIn profile of somebody that you want to send an email to, and you can click generate, and this will research the prospect, research this person, and helps you understand what this person is like, and helps you write a message. And what we had for a while was that some users were consistently double uploading people. Like all the time they would upload twice in a row the same person. And it took us like a few days to really figure out like, why are they uploading twice? Why would they upload twice? And so we did a user interview. We talked to them. We're like, hey, you constantly upload twice. Why do you do that? It's like, oh, I don't know. When I click it, it just uploads it twice. And we were very confused. We tested a lot of different people, computers. Okay, it doesn't do that for me. It doesn't do that for you. Why does that happen? But suddenly we watched the user interact with the product. And so first off, measuring, we saw it was only Windows users. Like, okay, weird, only Windows users. Then we started watching some of them use the product, and we saw that they were double-clicking on a button that we didn't think somebody would double-click on. And that's just a silly small thing, but it just creates friction that you want to reduce. And that kind of thing, in the beginning, we had probably tons of these, and the more we started to measure, to track, to watch users use the product, the more we were suddenly starting to understand a bit how they think, how they interact with things that we totally didn't see, because it's super hard to see everything through their eyes, because everybody has different habits, everybody has different points of views. And I think the more you can combine talking to users with measuring and then combining those, I think that helps, at least helped us a lot, boost forward a bit on building a better product. So yeah, just a quick recap. I think for us it was mostly about trying to really focus on the need. What is the user really, really needing? What is really changing the day of the user? Killing out, at least in the beginning, the users that do not match your ICP. And all of what I'm saying, by the way, is from an early stage startup perspective. If you work in a 500 people company, I'm pretty sure that the sales department would be very pissed if you start kicking out users after they spend months of acquiring them. So maybe talk to your sales department first. But if you are in an early stage companies, I think removing some users, no matter how hard it was to get them, and no matter if they are the first paying customers ever, I think was for us the best thing that we did. Talking to users, like I said, lots of things that you can avoid and do better, and then watching and measuring all the time everything that you can and combining that to build your roadmap. Now I'm curious about some questions. Hope somebody is slightly disagreeing or not. There you can scan to get on my LinkedIn. Feel free to connect. Would love to chat with you also over the next days. Feel free to send a message anytime. Also, if some of you, and that's a quick advertisement, 5 seconds, no need to skip. If some of you know deep tech investors, AI investors, we are currently fundraising, so send them over. Would really like to talk. Advertisement over. Yeah, so what kind of questions do you have, or what do you disagree with? What do you see different, maybe from a different point of view? Maybe you're not in an early stage startup. Would be very curious to talk.
We both disagree with a lot, so we have questions.
Oh yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jerome, please give a round of applause. That was very good. That was very nice. Thank you very much. Okay, so Q&A, like you said. Johnny has a question for sure. I have about 4 questions, so I'm going to try and narrow them down.
Now I'm scared if Ben has questions. I'm going to be ripped apart now.
No, I think overall the talk, I agreed with a fair amount of it. The bit I really wanted to clarify was, when you start to talk to users, do you design your questions up front and how much time do you put into that? Or do you first go in sort of like a preamble, I'll sort of blunder my way through this and then after that design the questions?
Yeah, good question. So I think in the beginning we had like a very fixed set of questions that we would go through. Set question 3, blah blah blah. Okay, he answered. Question 4. Okay, she answered. Okay, question 5. I think that didn't help us a lot because it was like ignoring a lot of things that the user said. So we were always like combining. So we have sets of questions, we have starting questions, and we have topics that we want to cover. But typically we would start with a question, and then the user would talk about something, and then we would double down on it, ask questions. Okay, why do you do that? Okay, they would go on, okay, this is, okay, and why do you do that? And then go deeper and deeper and deeper. So everything for us was always about trying to get deeper into the motivation, the reason why they did things. And so for that, typically we would just kind of follow along, and then at some point maybe get back to a question that we had on the list, something like that.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So my question is about that refusing users thing, right? Okay. So maybe I'm asking about the value of this ICP you talked about. Can you tell me what the difference between selecting a bunch of users who agree with what you say is and just creating an echo chamber that says you're always right?
Oh, that's a good one. So I think it's mostly, what we try to focus on is mostly the problem they have and the way they have that problem.
Yeah.
So not necessarily do they like our solution, but more in the sense of, okay, do they have a similar way of using the product, or do they have a similar way of having that problem that we want to solve? And then from there, I think obviously we need to have enough people of that kind, right? It doesn't help us if we have a very narrow ICP, but there's only 10 of that in the whole world, then that's not going to help us either. But yeah, I don't think it's an echo chamber in the sense of the users all don't necessarily have to agree with us, but it's just about finding users who have a similar type to focus. I guess for us it's just about focusing, narrowing down, and building something for a small group of people really well. And then once it's really good for that small group of people, we slightly increase the group of people, right? And so we go from a very small niche to slightly bigger niche to slightly bigger niche. And then each time we have more capacity to also cover more use cases, cover more ways of using the product, for example, in that case.
But there's a limit. Surely there's a limit there because, like, you're creating a very specific set of features for a very specific need, right?
Yes.
Which means that you can't really misstep because those people are looking for a specific thing, which helps you develop faster.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But then, as you increase that niche, those people and their needs are going to increase with you. So then, is there a point where, say, the third set of users? They're only interested in now these extra features, and the core features are, how do you...
Yeah, so I think that, for me, that would be, depending on when that happens, if it happens early, I think that would mean that we're building the wrong thing. If there's no more users, if a core feature only solves a pain for just a super small group of people and it cannot grow from there naturally, then I would think maybe it was the wrong product to build, the wrong problem to solve on. Depending on how far along you are, that might be a very bad thing to figure out. But other than that, I think so the problem has to be big enough and the group of people still big enough that you can grow for quite a while and stay on the core feature until you really solve the core feature. So for a lot of times in the past we had the problem that we said, oh, okay, we should also build feature X. But feature X was totally out of the core of the product. And I think it's super, at least in the beginning, super important to discipline yourself to not do anything outside of the core. So one of our product advisors always says, as soon as you can have another 10-person team working on that, then you can build the next set of features. I think that's actually a nice bridge to think about. Like core feature, one team, and then once you can have a second feature team, then it's good to scale. Yeah. But just not sure if there's a right or wrong there. But
Any other questions? Anyone? Yep.
Hey, you said you record the the user interviews.
yes.
And my problem with user interviews was I did them, and then a month later I forgot which users I talked about certain topics. Do you have a system to...
Yeah, so I think what we do is very not elegant, but we just put the videos in a Notion page or Notion table, and then we put tags next to them. And so typically we would put, for example, if we talk with that user about onboarding, we would put onboarding, and that way we could later on filter, give me all videos with the tag onboarding. Not really a perfect solution. I think transcribing might be better. I think there are quite a few tools out there that do that. I haven't yet tested them, but transcribing and then making it searchable is probably a good idea, but not sure what tools to recommend on that front. We just do it very hands-on, just adding tags and writing notes in the Notion that we can then search for, but yeah.
I like that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? No question? Yeah? I was a little shy at first.
Hi, my name is Kate.
Hi.
So my question is, are you offering any benefits for the attending your user tests? And if yes, how do you prevent participants from becoming biased and seeking the issues on purpose just to attend more of your user tests?
That's a really good question, and I thought about that for a while as well. I have no really good answer, just so we did some user interviews in the past by, for example, posting on Slack channels and saying $20 Amazon gift card. Works obviously magic, suddenly you have 500 people that really want to do user interviews with you. I think if you then still filter out those that have the right background, that have the right thing, and I think if then you still ask questions that they cannot say something that breaks your product about, then I think I would assume it's still fine to charge.